We are at the bottom of Kuf Dalet Amabei's Tanya. The Gemara had said yesterday, this is how we paskin. We paskin that if you're going from dairy to meat, you need to do... Yes. If you're going from dairy to meat, you have to do three things. You have to wash your hands, which we talked about yesterday, make sure your hands are not schmutzy, or during the day you look at your hands. And the other two things is called kinuach and hadacha. Kinuach means you have to eat something. The reason is we're concerned that there's residue of dairy in your mouth. So if you eat something, what you eat will sort of pull away the residue and rinse your mouth out. That's called kinuach and hadacha. The Gemara now will discuss kinuach and hadacha. Again, we paskin you have to do all three, which is the conclusion of the Gemara. But the Gemara says Tanya, Beis Shammai omer mekanech. Beis Shammai says you have to do kinuach. Now, kinuach is eating something. Now, Beis Shammai does not mention rinsing your mouth out. Beis Hillel omer madiach. Beis Hillel says to rinse your mouth out, but doesn't mention eating something. So each one is mentioning half of the coin. Now, the Gemara's conclusion, at first the Gemara assumes, I'll just sort of spoil a lot of today's daf. At first, the Gemara assumes that each one is saying bedafka. That Beis Shammai is dafka kinuach, that's all you have to do. Beis Hillel is dafka hadacha. They're arguing with each other. The problem is it's not true, and the Gemara's conclusion is that they both agree with each other. They're both just saying half the picture. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, you have to combine them together, and then you get the full picture of how to kash your mouth out, which is kinuach and hadacha. Zak the Gemara. My mekaneach, my madiach. What does Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel really hold? Ilema Beis Shammai omer mekaneach v'loy boy madiach. If the simple shot of the Gemara is that Beis Shammai says you have to do just kinuach, zehu, and Beis Hillel madiach v'loy bekanech, and Beis Hillel says just hadacha, zehu, meaning Beis Shammai says just eat something, Beis Hillel says just rinse your mouth out. Here's the problem. So that means that according to Beis Hillel, there's no such thing as eating your mouth, eating something, just rinsing your mouth out. There's no such thing as eating something. Meaning if they argue, that means Beis Hillel holds just rinsing. Beis Shammai holds just eating. The problem is we paskin, you're supposed to eat something. So that means that we're paskin Beis Shammai. Says the Gemara. Oh, sweet. Thank you. Says the Gemara. Elahad amar Rav Zera in kinuach pas ela bepas. But wait a minute. Didn't we paskin? Rav Zera said that what you should eat is bread because bread will clean the mouth out. So that means Rav Zera is handling in shitas Beis Shammai. We don't paskin like Beis Shammai. So in kinuach bepas kiman ki Beis Shammai. Meaning, if Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing, and the only one who believes in eating something is Beis Shammai, then why is Rav Zera handling shitas Beis Shammai? We don't pass like Beis Shammai. It must be that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the argument is not as extreme. Rav Zera talked about how to do kinuach. If kinuach is a Beis Shammai exclusive shita, we're not handling shitas Beis Shammai. We don't handle shitas Beis Shammai. We don't pass like it. In general, you never have Ameroyim handling shitas Beis Shammai lahalacha. You want to say in their opinion, that's one thing, but just to say opinion of Beis Shammai lahalacha, we don't pass that way. So it must be Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are not as polarizing. So rather, maybe it's like this. Beis Shammai are mekanech lo madiach. Let's go with this. Beis Shammai says you just have to eat something, no rinsing your mouth out. Beis Hillel are af madiach. Maybe Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai are arguing, but Beis Hillel is being more machmer. Beis Shammai says all you have to do is eat something, and Beis Hillel is saying you have to eat something and rinse your mouth out. Here's the problem. That's a possibility. That means Beis Shammai says one thing, Beis Hillel says two, and we paskin two. But that's a problem because now Beis Hillel is more machmer. There are lists in Mishnayos of situations where Beis Hillel is more strict than Beis Shammai, and this is not one of them. Says the Gemara. Havle mikula Beis Shammai chum Beis Hillel. The listening got mikula Beis Shammai chum Beis Hillel. So says the Gemara, you're right. There is no machlokes. Beis Shammai ayme mekaneach wadin ladiach. Each one is saying half of the shita, and you have to put it together, and there's no argument. Beautiful. Gufa. Amr Rav Zera. Now again, we paskin that kinuach means that after going from dairy to meat, you have to eat something. The purpose of eating something is that when you eat something, like you eat a cracker, the cracker will sort of, I don't say wash away because it's a solid food. It'll sort of schlep away the residue in your mouth. But that only works, I'll give you an example, it doesn't work with all food. If you eat caramel is not going to pull away dairy. Caramel is just going to stuff on your teeth. So the Gemara says, not all foods can be mekaneach. So Amr Rav Zera, ein kinuach hapela b'pas. You should eat bread. Bread is the best way to remove dairy. But says the Gemara, not all bread. Hani mili b'dechiti, wheat bread. B'sari loy, not barley bread. Apparently barley bread crumbles. So because it crumbles, it won't pull away, it'll just fall apart in your mouth and won't do the requisite effect. Also, even bread with wheat bread, if it's hot, it'll stick. Like very hot bread sticks to the back of your throat, so that's not good either. But if it's hot and it's hard, also, if it's hard, then it's also not effective. Hard crumbles. Like really, really hard bread that you're trying to eat, it's not going to do the right job. Okay. The hilchasa, but how do we paskin? Because according to this, it sounds like it has to be cold, soft wheat bread. But we don't paskin this way. You know how we paskin? All food is effective, except for very sticky foods. All foods can serve as kinuach, lebar mekimcha, except for flour, because that just pastes on the mouth. Tamri v'yiraki, dates and vegetables. If you eat a majul date, which my father and I very much like, majul dates, they're very sticky. And if you eat them, they like kind of stick to your teeth a little bit. They're a little caramelly in that regard. Therefore, it's not going to do a good job. Okay. Famous Gemaras in all of Shas. How long do you have to wait between meat and dairy? Now, we obviously are familiar with the 1 hour, the 3 hours, the 6 hours. But the Gemara asks Kasha, how long do you have to wait to go from meat to dairy? So says the Gemara, Amar Lev Loiklum, no need to wait at all. So that's a pella. I can go from a burger to pizza without waiting. Says the Gemara, Eini, is this true? V'amar Rav Chizda, Ochal basar aslach gvina. Gvina matlachal basar. Wait a minute, Rav Chizda says. No, you don't have to wait to go from dairy to meat. Right? If you have a piece of cheese, all you got to do is rinse your mouth out and eat it. There's no time that you need to go from meat. But meat to dairy, of course you have to wait. So how could you tell me there's no waiting? Of course there's waiting. Says Mara, you're right. Ella kama yisha bein gvina lebasar. You're right. The question was, how much time do you have to wait from dairy to meat? And to that, loiklum. There is no time. Okay. Aged cheese is different. That's not for now, huh?
Was this because of the stickiness?
No. All dairy, it's a code word for all dairy, because they also use chalav. All dairy is gvina, all dairy is chalav, it's all the same. Gufa, Amrav Chizda, Achal Basar, Aslach Gvina, Gvina Mutlachal Basar. Chizda says if you eat meat, you have to wait before eating dairy. Now, he doesn't say how long. So how long do you have to wait? Now, by the way, this is also very important. What is the reason why you have to wait 6 hours? If you hold 6 hours, why do you have to wait 6 hours? There's two reasons amongst the Rishonim. One is that meat in between your teeth, and one is meat that coats the throat. So the Gemara indicates that it has to do with meat in between the teeth, because the Gemara says, what is the status of meat in between the teeth? Is it considered meat in halacha? Do you have to remove it? If, let's say, I want to have dairy, and I see this meat in between the teeth, do I have to floss my teeth? He says it's a pasuk. The pasuk says that Hashem was going to send a plague while Klal Yisrael still has meat in between their teeth. They're going to get sick. This is with the Slav. So you see that meat in between the teeth is considered meat. Okay. This is the famous Gemara of waiting 6 hours. This is where it comes from. Never actually explicitly says 6 hours. I'll say it very quickly. Amar Mar Ukva. Mar Ukva says, Ana Aloha Milsa Chala Bar Chamer Legabi Abba. Mar Ukva says, regarding this halacha, I'm like vinegar, the son of wine. Meaning my father is like wine. He was frummer than I am. I'm like vinegar. Why? In what way? My father... His father would wait 24 hours from meat to dairy. 24 hours. So he would not eat meat. It's only 6 hours. He said, my father would wait 24 hours, like wine. Very, 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 very from. But me, I just wait bein suda l'suda. I just wait from meal to meal. I don't wait 24 hours. By the way, a couple things. First of all, the Arizal Taka waits 24 hours. But it's not the point. Couple a Musar Dikavart that I saw the Bali Musar. I think Chaim Shulevitz said that I don't know who it was. I don't want to misquote him, but they said I don't understand. He says his father's like wine, and he's like vinegar, which means that if his father's halacha is like wine, then why doesn't he keep it? If he's acknowledging that his father's like wine for waiting 24 hours, Marukva was he could do that. So the answer is Marukva knew himself and he wasn't holding that. That's what they said. That meaning you have to know yourself that this is a hiddur, that it wasn't for him. Anyway, so by the way, so how long do you have to wait? So he says, I wait from Suda l'Suda. So the basic understanding amongst the Rishonim, the Rambam, and most Rishonim is that bein Suda l'Suda is time. My father waited 24 hours. I wait the time between meal to meal. They used to have 2 meals during the day, 6 hours apart. Okay, so that's the most Rishonim. Rabbi Tam had a different sheet. Rabbi Tam said it's not time. It's Suda l'Suda. The second you bench, you could start right away. And the Dutch Jews that wait an hour, says the Taz, they're being machmer. Okay. Yeah. Amr. Yeah. Amar Shmuel, now that we mentioned someone's father being frummer than they are, the Gemara says, I have in other areas that someone's father was like more diligent in a certain area. Amar Shmuel, regarding this matter, my father is like wine and I'm like vinegar. This is the concept that a person should always observe his properties. If you don't watch your properties and you don't watch your workers, they're going to rip you off. My father would look at his properties, his fields, twice a day to make sure that everything was running properly. I only do it once a day. My father does it twice a day. And the Gemara says, Shmuel Tamei. Now, why is it that there's an Indian to look at the property? Because this is Shmuel L'Shitasai. Damer Shmuel, Mandasayir Nichse Kol Yoima Mishake Chastira. If you check your property every day, you'll find a gold coin. What it means is, you'll make sure that there won't be no one stealing from you. There's a concept, you should be on top of your workers, on top of your property. The Gemara has two stories of people being on top of their workers, and it paid off. Abaye would look at his property every single day. One day he caught his farmer stealing from him. His farmer's taking all this, the potatoes, and carrying on in a bag. Where's he going? He's stealing. So Abaye says to him, where are you taking? It was wool, actually. He said, where are you taking this? So the guy obviously got caught. So I was bringing it to you. Meaning, Abaye saw that the guy was caught and he was lying. So Abaye said, the rabbis already anticipated you. That's why I check every day. I mean, that's why the rabbis say to check every day, because of people like you. The Gemara has the following story. Sometimes you'll have this, similar that a sandik. If a sandik, the Rama says that a sandik is like the Kayan Makter Ketairis, that it's a skula for Ashirus, and therefore you shouldn't be a sandik for multiple boys in the same family. So the Gra famously said about this, he said, I've been a sandik many times, I've never seen Ashirus. The Gra says, I don't know where this is coming from. This Gemara is, the Chassam Sofer says this Gemara is the answer. What does the Gemara say? Ravasi would check his property every day. We said before, if you check your property, you'll find the gold coin. Meaning you'll make money. Amar Hecha Neinu Kol Hani Yister Demar Shmuel. He says, where are all these coins that people have been talking about? So Ravasi says, where are all these coins? So the Gemara says the following story. One day he's traveling, and I think anyone who's a homeowner will appreciate this. He's looking through his property and he sees a pipe burst. But he caught it right away. He saw a pipe burst, and there's water coming out of the pipe. Now, he caught it right away. But what does he do? He takes off his coat, he plugs up the hole. And I actually think this Gemara is very real. Ramakala, he shouts for help, which is like interesting. He's screaming, help, help. And people came quickly and were able to patch it up. Meaning, in other words, because he was scrutinizing property, he was able to find the hole right away. If not, his entire house would get flooded. And anyone who's seen what that can do, it could be very, very expensive. He says, I just found all the coins that Shmuel was talking about. Meaning, the coins are not necessarily means you're going to make money, but it could be saving a lot of loss is also making money. And that's what Chassam Sofer said about the Gra, that when you're a sandik, Ashirus doesn't mean you make money, but maybe avoiding a tremendous loss is also making money. Okay. Amar of Idi Baravin, Amar of Yitzchak Barashin. Mayim Rishonim. Okay, very, very kitzer. I'll do today's daf very quickly. When you wash for a Suda, there's going to be 3 washings. Washing for bread, obviously, mitzvah. Mayim Achroinim, which they would wash because there was salt on their fingers that could cause damage. Also, by the way, Mayim Achroinim, also there was harmful shadim that would attack it after you washed your hands. That's why they would wash it on the floor. So there's Mayim Rishonim, Mayim Achronim, and then there was Mayim Emtsoim. Mayim Emtsoim was very simple. They would wash their hands between courses. That was purely just because their hands were gross. That's not halachic. It's just, you're going from the hors d'oeuvres to the main course, and you're using your hands. Your hands are gross. That was purely what's it called? Hygienic. That was hygienic. Okay. So says the Gemara, Mayim Rishonim mitzvah. The Mayim Rishonim for Netilas Yadayim for bread, that's a mitzvah. Achroinim is a chayva. Mayim Achroinim is a chayv. It's a higher level because it affects physical danger. Therefore, it's a chiyuv. It's not just a mitzvah; it's a chiyuv. Meisvei, wait a minute. So you're telling me Mayim Rishonim, Mayim Achroinim are different. Rishonim is mitzvah, Achroinim is chayv. But doesn't the Brisa say Mayim Rishonim Achroinim chayva and Emtsoim rishus? It says that Mayim Rishonim Achroinim are both chayva. So I thought you said one's a mitzvah, one's a chayv. So the Gemara says mitzvah legabi rishus karelei. Really, one's a mitzvah, one's a chayv. The reason why they're both called a chayv is because in comparison to the mayim emtsoyim, washing between courses, which is purely hygienic, they're both a chayv. Really, compared to each other, mayim achronim is more chashiv. It's a chayv as opposed to a mitzvah. But when you're comparing the two to the washing between courses for hygienic, they're both a chayv. So it's just, it just depends on what you're comparing it to. Gufa, mayim rishonim achronim chayva, emtsoyim rishus. Okay. Now, regarding mayim achronim, which again, we wash because there's salt, but there's also shadim. The rest of today's daf, the reason why Amud Beis is so big is because it has to do with shadim. So the Gemara says, Rishonim noitlim bein bekli bein al gabi karka. The first waters, meaning waters for bread, you could wash into a kli or you could wash it on the ground. But mayim achronim ein noitlim ela bekli. You have to wash it into a kli. You can't wash it on the ground. The reason is because there's shadim. So it needs to be in a kli, and that protects from shadim. I don't know. It says the Gemara v'amrila. So the first version is that you could wash mayim achronim only into a kli. V'amrila ein noitlim agabi karka. The second version is you don't have to do it in a kli, but you can't do it on the ground. So what's the difference? I mean, the first version has to be in a kli. The second version is, doesn't have to be in a kli, it just can't be on the ground. What's the nafkamina? Can I wash it over wood chips? According to the first opinion, no, it has to be in a kli. According to the second opinion, it can't be on the ground. Wood chips are not the ground, therefore it's allowed. And it has to do with shadim. My benayu, ik benayu kinsa. Okay. A couple halachas about mayim rishonim. Again, just to clarify for anyone who's listening. Kinsa is wood chips. Just a couple things for anyone who's listening. Mayim rishonim is what we wash for bread. Mayim achronim is mayim achronim. Okay. So it says the Gemara, mayim rishonim noithlin bein mechamim mitzayim. You could wash mayim rishonim for bread, whether it's cold or hot water. It makes no difference. But achronim ain't oil mitzayim. But mayim achronim has to be cold. Why? Because the hot water will not get off the hot grease as well. I'm not sure why. It moisturizes the hands. Meaning, I guess the grease and all the salt in your hands are not going to be rinsed off. They're going to be sort of like melted into your hands, so it's not good. It does not clean as well. Cold water is better for mayim achronim. Okay, but mayim rishonim could be cold or hot. Mayim rishonim, no, it's in beimechamim mitzayin. We said that mayim rishonim could be cold or hot. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yanai lo yishanu elo she'en go the next page yatzal edisbo avi yatzal edisbo inoizlen. Even mayim rishonim can't be yatzal edis. When we said hot, you can't have scalding hot water. This is actually negayah sometimes because when you're washing for bread, sometimes if the water you put it the wrong side, it gets very very hot. If it's very very hot, then it's not considered mayim in halacha. It's considered like a tea, and therefore it's not kosher for mayim rishonim. So the first version is that mayim rishonim cannot be yatzaledes. But the ikad masil sefer, some have a different version that no, mayim rishonim could be yatzaledes. It's mayim achronim that cannot be yatzaledes. Some say achronim ain't loyim but sayna b'chamin loy Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yanai loy shaloi ain't yatzaledes but ain't yatzaledes by noitlin bechlal the rishonim after be yatzaledes by mutter. Meaning, according to this version, it's mayim achronim that can't be yatzaledes, but mayim rishonim could. Okay, I'm sorry, rishus. The washing in between courses is purely rishus, it's optional. Amr of Nachman, when we say it's optional, it's because it's hygienic. But if you're going from milk to meat, then that's a chiyuv, because then you're not washing for hygienic. You're washing to get rid of the cheese residue before you handle meat. But if you're going from course to course and it's purely hygienic, then it's optional. Okay. We're now going to enter the world of shadim a little bit. Why do we wash our hands after the meal? Because apparently mixed in salt was the melch stoimis, the salt of sdoim, and we're afraid that you might have handled it in your meal, and it might be on your hands, and it could cause someone to be blind. Therefore, we wash our hands. And it's found a very small concentration in average salt, but because of this, we wash our hands. But in addition to mayim stoimis, the melch stoimis, there's also a shadim component. Now, before we get to that, the Gemara says, so let's say I didn't eat the meal, but I was the chef who salted the dishes. Should I also wash my hands? I mean, it's a pretty obvious answer. Of course, the concern is salt on your fingers that might have melch stoimis. So the Gemara says, let me buy. That's pashut. Of course you have to. It doesn't matter that whether you ate or not. If you handle the salt, of course you have to wash your hands. Okay, we're now going to enter, about a couple, I think it's like 7 or 8 examples of the Gemara. Let me just say what the Gemara does. The Gemara says that there were certain phenomenons that people did not do. Just didn't do. And at first, Abaya says, I always thought it was for like practical reasons, hygienic reasons. It's all shadim. Okay? So the Gemara says, Abaya, Amr Abaya, Meresh Havamina, Hadleimoshi Maya Basrai Al Ara. I noticed that people do not wash Maya Machronim on the ground. So I thought originally, why, says Abaya, why did they not do this? Mishum Zuma. It's because it's gross. Think about it. If you're washing Maya Machronim because there's fat on your hands, you want the fat on the floor. And then what happens? It gets hot, it starts to smell. So Abaya says, I used to think that they didn't wash Maya Machronim on the floor. It's purely practical. But Amar Li Mar, but then Rabbi explained to me, Mishum Teshaya Ruach Ra'aleh. No, there's an evil spirit that rests when it lies on the ground. So it's shadim. It's not practical. Okay, Amr Abaya, another one. Apparently, if you're eating a meal, my father's eating a meal, and he has in front of him plates and spoons and forks, don't take anything from in front of him while he's drinking. You do not. So that says the Gemara, Amr Abaya, Meresh Havamina, the reason I originally thought, the reason why we don't take anything from the table, when someone is drinking from a cup of wine, or a cup, whatever, don't take anything from the table. Why? So Abaya says, either it was practical. It's very simple. I don't use my father for example, but Reuven is eating or drinking. Yeah, he's drinking, and you want to clear the table. You start clearing the table. It's very practical. While he's drinking, he wants to say, no, I'm still eating, and he starts coughing. Meaning he thought it was purely practical. That like if you take something away from him while he's drinking, he's going to get distracted, try to talk to you while he's drinking, and start coughing. Abaya says, that's what I thought originally, but it's not true. Amr Limar, but then Rabbi explained, Mishum Dekoshi Luruch Tsarda. There's a type of shade called Tsarda that attacks if you take something while someone's drinking. Okay? By the way, it's only a problem if you don't bring it back to the table. If you bring it back to the table, the shade won't attack. Also, it's only a problem if you took it 4 amas away from the table. But if you move it within daled amas, it's fine. By the way, it's also only a problem if you take away something that they need for the meal. Meaning, if something's on the table, a magazine that they don't need for the meal, you can take it away. The shade won't attack. If it's for the meal, he'll attack. Okay. The Gemara relates, Bar Rav Ashi would not remove spices or even a mortar and pestle, because that was used to prepare for the meal, and he wouldn't take it away while someone was drinking. Amr Abaya, another one. Meresh Havamin, originally I used to think, the reason why, apparently if there were breadcrumbs, that's fine, I'm very much about this. If there's breadcrumbs on the floor, they would sweep them up and discard of them, as opposed to leaving it on the floor. So Abaya says, I originally thought that the reason why they would do this is very simple. Mishum Mekirusa. It's cleanliness. They didn't want to get roaches. They didn't want to get bugs. It's not true. Amr Limar, Mishum Dekoshi Laniusa. But Rabbi explained to me the reason why they gather the breadcrumbs under the table, or the piece of bread, is because there's a shade that's called, his name is Nakid. And he attacks, I don't know if he's a shade or a malach. He's a malach, actually. He's not a shade. He's a malach. I apologize. The malach would attack anyone who steps on bread. Because if you step on food and it shows that you do not have the proper respect for food, they'll attack. So the reason why they do it has nothing to do with cleanliness or mice and bugs. It's to protect from this malach called the nakid. So the Gemara says the following story. And by the way, this nakid, if he attacks, he takes away your parnasa. So this nakid was going to attack a certain person. Apparently Hashem sent this malach to take away the parnasa of a certain person. But he couldn't, meaning there was no Pesach. Every time that he tried, there was no Pesach. Because why? Because Zahir and Shrusei Tuva. Because he was very particular not to have breadcrumbs or anything on the floor. So there's no way to get to him. So one day, one day this person ate outside in the grass. Now it's very hard to clean yourself up in the grass because you don't see the breadcrumbs. So the malach said to himself, Hashta vade nafa biyade. The malach said, oh, now I'm going to get him because he's going to step on the grass, stepping on the breadcrumbs, and I'll attack. By the way, it shows you, even if it's not like he didn't do it on purpose, he's going to get attacked. But the malach saw that after he ate the meal, outside, on the grass, he grabbed a shovel. He grabbed a shovel and shoveled up the area under his feet and threw it into the river. Said he wouldn't step on it, meaning that's ad kedei kach how far he went to clean up for himself after after eating outside. Shami de Ka'amar, he then heard the Malach say, Vai da'afke hu gavrim bebese. Man, this guy's kicking me out of his house, meaning I got nothing. I can't do anything on this guy. He's mamish cleaning up after himself, even in dirt. Amr Abaya, Mareish Havamina Hadale Shasi Ufya. Okay, another one. Apparently, when there's foam on top of beverage, like beer has foam on top, you don't drink the foam. So Abaya noticed that people don't drink the foam. So he said, originally I thought the reason why they didn't drink the foam is Mishum Yisusis, because it tastes bad. But Amr Limar, Barab explained, Mishum de Koshila Karsam. Karsam is not shadim. Apparently, it's a type of mucus, meaning it's not good for your health. If you drink the foam on top of beverages, I think its shtickle has to do with shadim or whatever, kishuf, but it affects your health. Now, the Gemara has some rules. Mishta kashla karsam. Drinking foam triggers karsam, which is some sort of mucusy, bronchiolitis type issue. Minfach, now if you blow, so you have foam on your drink. So you can't drink it. So what do you do with it? So minfach, if you blow the foam away, kasha l'reisha, that you get illnesses. That's shadim. Don't blow the foam away. Milcha, if you push the foam away with your hand, so you can't blow it. If you push it away with your hand, kashan yusa, that triggers poverty from the shadim. So my takante, so what am I supposed to do? I can't drink it, I can't push it, I can't blow it away. So l'shkuye shkuye, what you have to do is you have to wait for the foam to settle into the drink. Okay, a little bit more about this karsam, which is an illness that you get from drinking foam. L'karsam dechamra shichra. Okay, the antidote for karsa of drinking wine, let's say you drink the foam on top of wine, the antidote is drink beer. The shichra, if you drink the foam on top of beer, maya, drink water. The maya, but if you drink foamy water, which I've never seen foamy water before, there's no way to fix that. If you drink foamy water, you're going to get sick. There's no way to fix it. That's what people say. Poverty follows the poor. In other words, if you drink the foam on wine, which is a very expensive drink beer, which is a little cheaper. Foam on beer, drink water. Foam on water, there's nothing cheaper than water. You're stuck. Amr Abaya, Mareish Havamina. Initially I used to say, okay, basically, the farmer gives you a bushel of carrots tied together, and you want one carrot. You do not remove one carrot from the bushel. That will get you, the shadim will attack. You have to untie the bushel, then remove one carrot. Okay. And he said, I noticed that originally people would just take one carrot, would not take one carrot from the bushel, they would untie the bushel first. So I thought, it was just for manners, that to pull a carrot out of a bushel makes you look like a fresser. But Rabbi explained, kishuf. Apparently, kishuf, witchcraft, will attack if you pull one carrot or one vegetable out of the bushel. You have to untie the bushel. Okay. The Gemara has stories that back this up about kishuf. The Gemara says, Rav Chizda v'Rabbi Rav Huna have a kozli ba'arba. Rav Chizda, the rest of the Gemara is very interesting stories. I don't know what to do with it, but this is the type of thing you'll prepare a shir. You could maybe find machshavin. I'm not sure. Rav Chizda and Rabbi Rav Huna were traveling on a boat. Amr He says, a certain woman, I'm assuming a Gaisha woman, so she was on the boat. She said to them, sit together with me on the boat. She said, I want to sit with you. I'm not sure why she wanted to sit with these Rabbanim. Well, it turns out she's a witch. She's a witch. So, okay. Lo Yaseh, they didn't want to sit with her. So Amr Milsa, angered by this, she recited a spell. Asartin la'arba, and the boat stopped moving. In mid-water, mid-ocean, the boat stopped. Amr Inu Milsa, they recited a spell to counter the witchcraft. So Rashi brings down, how are Rabbanim making spells? I thought we don't do that. So Rashi says maybe they use the Shem Hashem. Because they said their own incantation and the boat started moving. So she was upset by this. She was obviously a witch. But this is what she said to show why she has no power over these Rabbanim. Amr Lahu, she said, what can I do to these Rabbanim? I have no Pesach to harm them. Why? They don't use, after the bathroom, they don't use a shard of pottery that someone else used, which we learned in the past causes kishuf. They don't kill a louse while it's on their clothing. They remove the louse, then kill it. These are all openings for kishuf. And they don't pull out a vegetable from the bundle. They undo the bundle. So I have no Pesach. Okay. Following story. I don't know what to do with this story, but Rabbi Abaye noticed that people will not eat a vegetable that falls from the table, that falls on the ground. So originally Abaye said, I thought it was mishum misusa. I thought it was gross. The floor is gross, and don't eat vegetables that fall to the floor. Amar limar, but then Rabbi explained to mishum the kosh l'rechapeh. It causes bad breath. Bad breath. V'amar Abaye, mereish havamina del yosvi tuti marziva. Okay, this is the story. Abaye noticed that no one was sitting under the drain. What's it called? The gutter. You know, the gutter opens up into a drain. No one sat under the drain. So I would say, yeah, because if you sit under the drain, you're going to get wet. So he says, I would say, mishum shayvchem. It's because people spill waste, by the way, not just wet. They would pour urine. If you were on the top floor, how do you think you got your urine down to the bottom floor? They poured it through the drains. So Abaye said, I noticed people never sat under the drains. I thought it had to do with getting wet or getting gross. But then, Amr Limar, Barab explained, Mishum the Shchichim Mazikin. The reason is because Shadim live under the drains. That's where Shadim live. I love this next story. I find this next story to be fascinating. The Gemara says the following story. There were two porters who were carrying a barrel of wine. They wanted to take a rest. And they rested with their barrel of wine. They put the barrel of wine down under a drain. Okay, which is where we said Shadim live. Paka, it burst. The shade caused the barrel to burst. So I say, Lakame Demar Ravashi, these two porters brought the shade to Bezdin. I don't know what that means, but they brought the shade to Bezdin. So Mar Ravashi has the defendant. The defendant is the shade. So Amar Lei, Amai Tavid Hachi, Mar Ravashi said to the shade, why'd you burst the barrel? So Amar Lei, Hey Chiyavid. He said, what do you want me to do? Ais Febuni, they put the barrel in my ear. Meaning, I was sleeping, and they put the barrel on my head. You don't think about it. If the shade's living there and he put the barrel down, he said, they put the barrel on my head. Of course I'm going to burst the barrel. Okay? Amar Lei, Mar Ravashi said though, At beduchte de shchichi rab, my boys. Yeah, but you can't make your house in a public area. So you owe them money. You're the mazik. Meaning, if I go into your house and then you damage, that's one thing, but you can't just set up shop in the street. Atu deshanis. You acted with a pshia. Zil shleim, you owe them money. So Amar Lei, so the shade responded, Hashanami likvei mar zimna ve'efra. I need time to gather the money so I can pay. Give me a month. Okay, cover these mana. Kimad zimna akiv. A month passes, he doesn't show up to Bezdin. He reneges on his payment. Kiyasa Amar Lei, when he eventually comes, Mar Ravashi said, Amai lo yasa b'zimnach. It took so long to gather money. What took you so long? Amrlei kol mili de tsayir v'chosim v'kayil u'manilon reshusel u'mishkol minei ad meshachin mit aftera. He says because shadim do not have the ability to take anything wrapped, sealed, or measured or counted. We can only take things of hefker. Meaning, in other words, we don't have the right to just take stuff. I can only take hefker. So it took me a while to find enough hefker money to pay back. Okay, just to finish up the daf. Amar Abaye mereish havamina the shadi maya mepum de chatzpa. Abaye noticed that before people would drink from a cup of a barrel, a pitcher, they would pour off a little first. Pour off a little first, always. So he thought, mishum tzivta, he thought that there must be shmutz at the top of the barrel, they were pouring off. But Amar Limar, but Rabbi explained, no, mishum de'ika mayim aroyim, it's because of shadim. Shadim might have drunk from the top of the water, and that would make the water harmful, so you got to spill it off. Hahu be'shida, just to end off. I think this is fascinating. It's like a little Havdil Alpha Havdilis. You know, Ghostbusters had their own ghost. Apparently, Rav Papa had a shade who was his gabbai. So, Hahu Bar Shid Rav Papa. He was a good shade, but he was Rav Papa's gabbai. Lasuyi Maya Dinara. So he went to bring water from the river. Yaakov, but he took a long time. So they asked him, Chiyasa Amrlei, Amai Yaakvis. He said, why'd you take so long? Amrlei, Adechalvi Mayim Aroim. I was waiting until the harmful water would pass. Meaning, he saw that Shadim were drinking from the water in the river, and he didn't want to take that water, so he had to wait. I didn't want the water that the Shadim drank from to go into the barrel. Adahachi, but when he gave them the water, he saw Chazanu Dakashadi Maya Mepuma Dechatzba. He noticed that Rav Papa was always pouring off a little bit on top anyway. So even if there was Shadim in the water, he would pour off anyway. He says, Amr, Yavi Adana de Regilis Lemevet Hachi Lo Yaakov. Had I known that you poured off anyway, I wouldn't have waited so long because I realized that you have your own measure to protect yourself. I will stop here.